We take refuge in love and clear seeing. We live courageously in this world of birthing and dying. Our hearts embrace all companions on this path of lucidity and freedom. For the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. Sadhu. I was just thinking that because we have people who are joining us, and in a sense, traditionally speaking, we have a kind of ongoing exploration happening, right? And so we need to have a recap because we have to go back to the beginning and catch everyone up to where we are. But actually this becomes very, very easy if we just take a different tact. And this is to somehow come to the point where you recognize that every moment you're beginning. Right? We're just buds. Right? We begin at the beginning. And the beginning is where you are now. Is what you are now. If you think about it, what else have you got to work with? What else do you have to work with? Really? I mean, you say, oh yeah, but what about yesterday? But that thought's arising right now. There's this extraordinary nowness that's with us all the time, and we never recognize it. We're busy living in thenness, and perhaps tomorrowness, but actually, moment by moment, we're actually nowness. It was a strange thing. And then we work our way through this incredibly complex, vast teaching in Sadhana, the path of natural awakening, Primordial Dharma, whatever you want to call it. And finally we get to the end. And when we get to the end, we discover that the end is exactly where you are. And it's a peculiar thing, this. I mean, actually it puts you all off. It ends this class immediately and puts me out of work completely. Because actually, what's the point doing all this kind of investigation and engagement with life if in the end you just end up where you began? So just for a moment, imagine for the possibility of settling into this moment here, sitting together in this room. For you beings who are visiting us through Zoom, sitting wherever you're sitting, right, surrounded by the atmosphere and the weather and the smells and the textures and the happenings of your physiology, right, your memories, your expectations, they're all dancing in this extraordinary moment, right, where we begin. And perhaps the only thing that we could say shifts or changes, and it's just a way of speaking, right, is that there is a kind of an expanding appreciation of this ever-present beginningness. Right? Like a flower, it's like we had the beautiful, this is great, thank you, Anne. We've got this lovely bud, and then it begins to kind of open. Right? And you might say, well, I began at conception. And then there was this kind of opening. Right? An opening of what? Right? An opening of kind of responsive engagement. It's just there. It's happening. It's your physiology. It's your relationships with others. It's your family. It's your culture. It's the biosphere that you're dwelling in and part of. So just for a moment, see if you can become quite still and contact this quality of this flowering that is your being. Perhaps you would notice it more in terms of your interest. It's a flowering of interest. It's a flowering of almost like expanding engagement. The curious thing seems to be that wherever you look, whatever you see, whatever you experience, becomes part of this nowness. Okay. Is there, what do you know that's not part of this? And there might be a kind of gradual, in a way we could say that this path of contemplative living, this natural awakening, right, really begins with a kind of an intuitive, felt sense that there is a wholeness about things. And a kind of desire, if you like, to engage with that or to taste it or to be this more fully. There's a kind of unbroken wholeness about this world, which so often we live in ways that feels like not unbroken, it's totally fragmented. Wholeness is a kind of wonderful ideal that we hang on to. Okay? And we seem to live in kind of conflictive fragments and so on. And we could say this path of, this is taking place whether you're working in an office, or whether you're a farmer or a fisherman, right? Or whether you're starting a family or kind of coming to the end of your life. This beginning point, this end point is with us. This is what we work with. And I suppose in a sense what we might call the path of kind of Dharma, I think of it as natural awakening, right, is when we have a feeling that we could perhaps enter into this and consciously participate. And I know that you've all been participating, some of you for years. And so this is a little tiny preamble. There, I've caught everyone up. Right? We began at the beginning and now we're here. Right? That which is still be the beginning. It's what an extraordinary thing at the end of your life to feel like you're at a beginning. And so often the only way we can think of this is beginning of, well, maybe there's going to be another lifetime, a reincarnation. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the flow of our experience. Do you have any idea what you're going to be doing this afternoon? Or actually, I don't know what the time is where you are. Right? Later on in the day. You maybe you have a here and now conception of what might happen. Fair enough. Okay? But surely you've had experiences in your life where sometimes the unexpected happens. And it takes you off in a totally different direction. Okay? And you think, oh, that was the beginning. So I'd like to, before I go into this further, I'd like to just have a space to see if there are any observations or discoveries or sharings in your engagement with this discovering a comfortable posture, right? And making friends with your breathing, right? Invite your entire body-mind community to settle into a place of pristine stillness and vivid, awake presence. This is how we begin the sadhana. Actually, it's how we end the sadhana. It's stillness in the sense that you enter into this fullness of now and don't depart from it. You're absolutely still. Even though this now may be dancing and doing all kinds of things. Anyone would like to share any observations or raise any questions arising out of this work we've been doing, this kind of ongoing work? And I think the people who are just coming in for the first time, you'll just have to have patience. You might find it interesting to hear how other people are unfolding this. Right? And then we'll recap and take it a bit further. Stephen, maybe you could keep an eye on if anyone online was going to contribute. Yes. Yeah.
So, touching last time, that comfortable.
Yes.
I recall you said it was the absence of needing to defend anything.
Well, for some people that's what it is.
And then that sense of nowness, what I often find is that in my practice, generated from life, there will be a sense that, no, there is something I need to defend, and it will take my attention away from just being still in the moment and accepting whatever is arising. So the comfort is like, no, there's something, right? The sort of thought, no, I have to go and do, there's something I need to do to be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sense of, first of all, to be comfortable, I need to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's some thought that moves in the mind,
yes,
and says, Jane, you've got to go do this or that, then immediately I lose my sense of view that all is well.
Have you ever felt safe and felt uncomfortable at the same time?
Yes, it's comfortable and safe.
So it doesn't actually guarantee, safety doesn't guarantee that you're going to feel comfortable.
True.
And I mean, I spoke about this, if any of you are just joining us now, we're doing a very kind of slow meander, if you like, through a text, which I compiled roughly 5 years ago, and it was, in a way, it was an attempt to summarize in one kind of almost like a memory verse form the entire body of Buddha Dharma, right, into kind of one practice, right? So it's kind of rich, right? And it begins to cultivate this sadhana of naturalness. I pointed out that instead of calling it the sadhana of Samantabhadra and turning it into I don't know if you people on the screen can see the painting behind me, a Tibetan thangka, a kind of blue Buddha figure in yab-yum with a white dakini figure, this kind of thing. Never mind that, forget about that. That seems so far away from living in New Zealand. Probably in Canada, you're just filled with blue Buddha figures and so on. But here in New Zealand, we just have sheep. And politicians these days. We have sheep and politicians. Right? And so let's forget about Samantabhadra for now, right, in terms of what does that mean and what does it symbolize. And actually, we'll just replace it with the word naturalness. Right? So to cultivate this praxis of naturalness, natural abiding. I mean, forget about whether it's here and now or tomorrow or yesterday or anything. There's a sense of nativity. It means birth. Natural's got something to do with like continual birthing. As I've suggested to people many times, that I think it can be quite fruitful for some people to consider the idea that your whole life is a life of gestation. Right? I mean, in a sense, we're born from the womb of our mother into the womb of the larger mother. Right? It's sort of like that birth was just a kind of a transitory birth. Right? We were already in the womb of the larger planet. Right? Inside the planet, inside our mother, inside, right? And then you just became a bit too big. But the process didn't change. We just had to kind of unplug. Instead of having a single umbilical cord, you then plugged in through breathing with green plants, and plugged in through your eyes, and plugged in through your ears, and we're fed, right, by these engagements, right? We're still gestating, and I think it's a good image, because I find it difficult to imagine that the fetus has a dicky bird of an idea of who or what they're going to be when they grow up. Right? Somehow we think it's realistic enough for us human adults to think, well, what am I going to be when I grow up? Remember, we brought this up a little while ago, and somebody said to me, I'm now 55, and I suddenly realized I'm still asking this question. What am I going to be when I grow up? Right? Whereas I don't imagine the fetus asks this question. Right? They're in a sense of becoming. And that becomingness that they are is relationship, like between the fetus and the mother, between the creature and the environment, between the inner and the outer. Right? There's this kind of growing, this gestating, this birthing, this budding. Right? And so to cultivate this quality of budding. We could be hunter-gatherers, but we've gone a bit beyond that. We've turned into farmers. Right? And so we were just given a zucchini plant today. It's now nicely tucked away in our warm glasshouse, waiting for the right conditions to be put into the garden. Right? And so we have this kind of to cultivate a garden involves choice. No, don't want any zucchinis. Oh, I'd like some more zucchinis. Oh, I think I'll put this one here. I think we'll pluck that one out. These plants here, which are absolutely delicious and edible to countless numbers of little microorganisms and insects, are horrible and they're inedible and they're weeds. Pull them out. Right? And these ones here, right, which are really yummy and delicious, we'll keep these ones in. When we cultivate things, it involves the kind of a sense of agency and making choice and so on. So we're not just kind of sitting here letting what happens. We're recognizing that I do make choice in a very ordinary way, and how can I make wise choices? How can I make skillful, in tune choices? So to cultivate this praxis of naturalness, arrange yourself in a comfortable posture. And I did a play on this, and many texts will say, take up a posture for meditation. And they'll describe the sevenfold posture of the Rochina. Sit in this way, and your legs are in this way, and your chin's tucked in, your tongue's up there, and your eyes are like this. But there are myriad different kinds of postures which are called, what you're supposed to take up to begin the meditation. But in this one we say arrange yourself, like a flower arrangement. I begin to see I'm made up of, like if I, you kind of do, well, I'll do this red flower here, and it looks really nice with this little bit of green foliage there, and a little sparkle of blue over here. And I have this arrangement. Part of myself is my feelings and my memories and my physiology of the moment, right? And my expectations for this afternoon, these are all flowers, right, in the pot. Can I make a harmonious, it's like ikebana, it's like flower arrangement or something. So chosenness, don't take up a posture, arrange yourself. There's a kind of a quality there of how do you judge how the arrangement's going to be? What do you find at this time is kind of harmonious and beautiful in your living? Okay? Arrange yourself in a comfortable posture, not in an upright posture or any kind of particular physically described posture, but comfortable. And I pointed out that comfort, I've made a play on this, and this is why I'm just reiterating this, that it had something to do with fort, with strength. But we feel comfortable when we feel strong. We don't feel strong when we feel under threat and we feel vulnerable. Generally speaking. Right? What gives me a sense of strength? And so at the beginning you go, well, I feel strong when I sit in this posture and I do this and do that. Okay, fine, begin there. Right? If that makes you feel strong. But gradually, this is a huge exploration, by the way. I was just talking to someone the other day is now teaching Dharma quite a lot and been practicing and studying with various teachers for years and years and years. And they say, well, I'm finding it, I just seem to be spending all my time working on finding a comfortable posture. Right? A comfortable posture, right? Don't think of a physical geometry, right? It's a kind of a posture is a kind of a gesture. It's a hint and a way of being. Right? And so something that gives us a sense of strength, right? And so maybe physically you can be in a certain way that gives you don't try and take up a comfortable posture. You kind of arrange yourself in a direction of greater kind of strength, right? That you feel relaxed. You feel actually greater strength when you feel relaxed, when you feel effortlessly awake. Right? It doesn't mean kind of some muscular thing here. Right? What for me strengthens my being? If being suspicious and backbitey and snarly with your neighbors strengthens your being, that's the posture you should take up. But I think there's a good possibility that if you take up that posture, you find that it's not really that strengthening. Then you get a posture, you go, well, I got to feel safe. So you make walls and you say, no, I won't do that, and I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I make walls. And I find I still don't feel strong because I feel lonely. I feel disengaged. I feel not, right? What does it mean to be thoroughly engaged, to be the fullness of the gestating that you are? What is this comfortable posture? That's why I'm pronouncing it differently, because often when we say comfortable, we just mean kind of laid back. Right, or floppy. And can I find, like, as many of you realize, I've had a number of medical procedures recently, and some of them are traditionally described as uncomfortable, right? If you could imagine such a thing, right? So how do you find a place of strength when your body's been completely smashed up with surgery, or you're full of drugs? This is an interesting question. Does it mean that I have to set aside my practice now? I can't. There's no strength in beingness. I wonder if the real comfortable, to feel really strong, is to be unshakably, to realize that what you are is the fullness of this now. Not as an aspiration, not as a hope, but as a kind of a realization. So take up a comfortable posture, and then making friends with your breathing. And all of a sudden, right, this is like in this place of strength, adding this quality of kind of friendship with your breathing, this kind of tidal ebbing and flowing of your breath. And you're driving the car. I think now I've finally got to the point after all these years of teaching that I'm just about ready to say this, what I'm talking about right now, just again and again and again and again and again. And we're probably using different words or different metaphors or what have you, but we don't need to turn the page. You begin where you are. If you all of a sudden, okay, I've begun where I am, now what do I do? In a sense, the whole sadhana is right there in this first section. Okay? And making friends with your breathing. Let's do this together right now. Invite, right? Making friends with your breathing. Invite your entire body-mind community. And we're already beginning to kind of hint at something. It's not just a body and a mind, and it's not seeing that I am this singularity called a me, but I am, as a singularity, already a we, right? As a community. Right? A community of cells, a community of relationships, a community of friends. Right? I can't step outside of these relational knowings that I am. Right? It's like, how is it that we spend so much time desperately forgetting that? Right? Inviting your body-mind community to settle, right, into a space, a domain, a way of being, right, where you're just, that settledness is the stillness. It doesn't mean not doing anything. It doesn't mean inactive, right? That's a different kind of stillness. That's stillness as opposed to movement. But what about the stillness, the kind of unshakable, deep, a kind of deepening sense that my living is truly all I've got to work with. It's all I've got to offer. Settling, right? Could you imagine trying to push it into a place of stillness? Right? Let's change the text. Being extremely critical about the quality of your breathing, demand that your entire body-mind community settle immediately into the here and now. And if you approach that, I bet you can't do it. There's something here, it's almost like a powerful valuing of moving in this direction without a sense of compulsion to have to push in that direction. There's a gentleness in contemplative work. So, and what you might find is sometimes you just little things here. It's like really handy if you're interested in pursuing this, rather than just hoping it works. Right? Then it's very handy to have supports that you feel you can work with. So maybe at some moment you're just there with your breathing. Forget about all the other details. It all fills in. Okay? Or you're there with this kind of smiling quality. You're smiling, you're breathing. Right? Your vibrantly awake presence. You're present. This is how we begin. This is the preparation for this work. And it's preparation that goes on forever because we're gestating. You're always preparing, in a sense, for this kind of... Imagine for a moment that after a while you just give up on preparing for something and you live. That would be wild. Does that sort of re-shed any light on comfortable?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a question from
Yes.
Matt.
Who?
Matt?
Matt? Where's Matt? Wave so I can see you at least.
Oh, probably
Oh, it's
means
Tara.
me,
Yeah.
because it says I'm called Matt right now.
Right. Tara.
I think you kind of did just answer it. My question was around vibrantly awake presence, because feeling vibrantly awake isn't something that I'm able to contact readily all the time at the present. I guess you were just talking about how it's an invitation, not a demand.
Think of it as like a kind of a it's almost like not a moving towards this, but I think it comes down to a valuing of this. When we really value something, we move towards it. It's almost like that's what it is. Okay? And so here we're just beginning this. We're just beginning to cultivate this praxis of naturalness. That's all. To actively, intentionally participate in cultivating naturalness in my being. If I'm not interested in the sadhana, I'm not interested in cultivating naturalness in my being, that's good. Have a lovely day. Right? It's like you do what you do. But this is preceded by the desire to cultivate a garden. Sit down and dream about the wonderful garden that you could have and hope that it happens. That isn't how you cultivate a garden. Yeah. So there's a kind of there's an aspiration to this. There's a kind of there's a direction, there's a valuing of this, of becoming more skilled, more engaged, that you begin to see there's a tremendous mess in the world. And it seems like the messier it is, the less people are actually wonder-filled with the living that they are, and the more they're just caught up in kind of agendas which ultimately seem to be really destructive. Okay. And so you begin with this. It's a kind of an aspiration, right? It's an aspiration both for myself and for my kind of suspicions. I have this suspicion that I'm interconnected with others. This is a wild, crazy idea. Eh? It's very Buddhist, right? Only Buddhists are interconnected, right? Other non-Buddhists, they're not interconnected. I don't know what they are, right? Kind of mechanically, kind of linked or something, right? Now we're talking about something which is just so natural to being. We find ourselves in a dance of responsive engagement, responsive knowing. Right? You get a bit cold, you shiver, or you put on a bit more clothing. You get too hot, you take something off. You're continuously in this kind of responsive dance. And then all of a sudden you forget all about that. Is what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? And how the universe, at that moment when there doesn't seem to be this kind of vibrantly awake presence, right? Where is the vibrantly awake presence? Right? Well, it's right there, constructing and giving rise to the feeling of absence of vibrantly awake presence. It takes a beating heart to have lack of vibrantly awake presence. It takes a breathing organism to have a lack of this, right? It's very difficult because the teaching often benefits by having a kind of poetic hints to inspire us to go further, right? But it's also very difficult because we have this tendency to seize on the hint and then think we have to achieve this, right? That could I invite the community that I am, the community of relatings that I am. And I don't know where it began, I don't know where it ends off, but nevertheless I'm going to invite that to settle into the fullness of what it is. Right? And you see in that settledness there's a tremendous amount of noting. Right? Like do you note, for example, you note that you're not vibrantly present. That's it takes just to get it, that's a vibrant noticing. But we don't value that because we've got this idea, oh no, I want this kind of glorious white stuff and I don't like that kind of muddy brown stuff, or whatever it is. Nathan.
Oh, you just hit the point, don't you? You just kind of, there were two things in kind of what you're saying, because I always wondered when you were talking about love and clear seeing, it's sort of something that keeps coming back to me, kind of some of the other things we've done. And I think now more so I'm just equating seeing with noticing, and also this question of cultivating. I was sort of a bit uncomfortable with it because, much like you were saying, looking at these texts, I felt habitually the habit to look at it, the words, as if a state to be achieved or something to be arrived at, is falling away, I think more so, but I just am appreciating the value of noticing things. It's probably really valuable.
Well, when there's rich noticing, surely this, another way of describing this is that's a quality of aliveness. When there's not much noticing, there's not much of a sense of a quality of aliveness. Right? Then we shift it, of course, and we say, yeah, but I only want to notice really aliveness is wonderful stuff. Right? But aliveness can be also made, guess what? We're all getting old and our hair's falling out and our brain cells are decaying and atrophying and things fall apart. Right? That's actually, they don't fall apart. They're still gestating. This is just the gestation of now. What a glorious thing to enter into this willingly. Right? And the thing is that we can spend a lot of time discussing what these things mean.
Sure.
And that's to miss the point entirely. The praxis is not looking at this and trying to understand what comfortable means or what does Tarchin mean by that. But it means arranging myself in a comfortable posture. It means something to you. These are not extravagant, wild words. Making friends with my breathing. Do it now, as I'm speaking. And at the same time you're doing this, right? Constantly arranging. You don't arrange yourself and then make friends with the breathing. The arranging is happening all the time. Right? You're making friends with your breathing, and you're inviting your body-mind community. Right? It's just to try and see the whole of our being to just gradually settle into the fullness of what it is. So that you become, in a sense, there's a quality of stillness, which means that you're not the fullness that I am, fragmented that I am. Oh, now a little bit of settledness, a little bit of integration. Oh, now I'm out for here. Oh, now. Right? there's a continuity of this aliveness. That is a stillness. Right? It doesn't mean still in the sense of not moving. It means you're still you. It means you're still now. And that is not just a stillness that is kind of a dead sort of frozenness, but it's vibrantly awake. Right? The stillness itself, there's a kind of, have you noticed any sensations in your legs since I've been talking? I wasn't directing you to look at that. What's the big deal? You're being distracted. Right? Have you noticed anything happening in your stomach or anything happening in your senses, or there's some kind of, right? We call them disturbances, but imagine for a moment if you live in a world with no disturbances. It's kind of wild. There's change, and there's also pleasure, right? So in other words, this disturbance isn't very pleasurable. Fair enough, right? But it's, right, you're kind of having a sense of this positive living that's taking place. Can I enter into this? Okay? So smiling, breathing, and present. It's just a reiteration of the first section. With an expanding appreciation for the spacious, open, interbeing, interknowing nature of this ongoing experience that I am. Okay? It's not just I add interknowing here because I find that this beautiful phrase that Thich Nhat Hanh coined, interbeing, right? He had this sense of, for many people, a sense of incredibly complex Lego set universe in which everything is interdependent with everything else, right? But it's almost like an interbeing has a sense of a noun. It could be a verb, right? We could interbeing as a verb, but when we talk about interbeing, it can have an incredibly complex arrangement of objects that make up our ecosphere, right? We're all interconnected and so on. But actually, if we look at it again from a different perspective, we see that there's relational knowing that's taking place, right? That this sense of knowing is not just kind of human verbal knowing, but we have kind of corporeal knowing. There's kind of molecular knowings, right? There are atomic knowings that together make up molecules, right? There are organ knowings that make up organism, right? There's knowings within knowings within. It's an interknowing, interbeing. They're not really, it's like the form, the mind, the matter, right? There's a play that's happening, right? And it's community. Right? So we're smiling and we're breathing and we're present. If we're not sure how to work with this, we just stay with the reminders of the first section. You want to stay with that because you can't really do a heck of a lot with it. They're relatively simple. Make friends with the breathing. Invite yourself to kind of settle. Right? This quality. But now we're going further. Smiling, breathing, and present with an expanding appreciation for the spacious, open, interbeing, interknowing nature of all experience. Okay? So we're kind of settling more into this. And here we're beginning to, if you like, study all various things that make up our experience, how our physiology works, how our emotions are working, how is this interbeing, interknowing nature happening? Right? And feeling at the same time this kind of deep stirring. Right? There's a kind of an appreciating of how everything arises dependent on myriad other things. This is a kind of a deep, you're smiling, you're breathing, you're appreciating. And this, gradually, you begin to realize this is all you have to offer. This is your offering. Right? And that offering is kind of what in Buddhism we sometimes refer to as bodhicitta. Right? This is this desire to support others in their aliveness. Feel a deep stirring of a naturally evolving disposition for cultivating both in ourselves and others the magnificent human potential for panoramic, multi-realmed awareness. This is a potential that's there. It doesn't develop without you participating in it. Right? It's like you can, I mean, you do an enormous amount of growing in the first 9 months of your life. Right? And you know, you don't really have to have much of a sense of participating in it. No, put that cell over here. No, got the wrong place. A little bit to the side. No, glue onto that one. No, you've got 5 chambers in your heart. No, kind of, where's, anyone got an eraser? you're trying to assemble this creature, this creatureliness, which knows how to change its heartbeat in relationship to how much muscular activity is happening, that knows how to digest material coming into its organism, that knows how to process oxygen and so on. It kind of does all this. It's fantastic, and you don't have to do anything. Right? There's a sense of that, right? But eventually, if you just kind of sit there like this, and you don't do any further kind of growing or exploring, you know, you didn't automatically just come into an understanding of how to relate to the complex community that you live in today. Just happened. You grew into it with experimentation. You try this and you try that, and, right? There's a kind of a natural kind of growing into this. Okay? And so there's this kind of evolving disposition to help bring forth in oneself and others this magnificent potential for panoramic, multi-realmed awareness and ceaseless compassion and love. Right? An extraordinary capacity to accept the kind of legitimacy of another as they are in the flow of their living. Right? Doesn't necessarily, strangely enough, you know, it may be that you would prefer them to be different. But if you love them, you can accept them for being how they are. That this quality of love is not separate from, there's not love and clear seeing. That the clear seeing, to really clearly to allow the other being to be this incredible mystery. How many people, never mind other non-human creatures, how many people do you relate to on a daily basis in which you're relating to incredible, unfathomable, immeasurable mystery? And we are engaging, and we're finding out what happens through this relationship. We both transform in the relating. And you compare that to how many people in your life you're relating to because they're the bank manager. or they're the social worker, or they're the checkout person at the counter at the store. Right? I mean, I'm just pointing out how easy it is for us to kind of slip into. We don't have panoramic awareness. We're sort of aware of certain things, and we've forgotten all about, right, how our feelings are that day and how they're affecting our physiology. Or, psychologically we say we project our stuff on others. Wouldn't it be marvelous to live this way? Would it? Well, through cultivating this immeasurable, all-encompassing expanse of spontaneous love and clear-seeing presence, through cultivating this, may we loosen the hypnosis of kind of blind conventional living, the hypnosis of samsara, and release into the ocean of collaborative creation. If I'm creative, it's always in collaboration. There's no such thing as being creative without collaborating. May we manifest ways of living that uplift all beings. This Terra is an aspiration. It's not a demand, right? Because it's not a demand, you can't fail. But you can kind of live in this way. And, for some people, these kind of words can serve as reminders of this that we value. Right? And then we work with the this, not the words. But sometimes this becomes even more stable. And we move on to the third section. Da-da-da, we finally get here. Okay? Refuge. Within this primordial space of contemplation, okay? This space of smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, right? Kind of aspiring to live well, to uplift others, right? Within this, within the midst of this, reflect on refuge. And by refuge I mean reflect on your deepest sense of groundedness, connectedness, and belonging. Okay? Right? Reflect on it for yourself. Reflect on it for your friends, for others. Okay? I mean, it's quite extraordinary actually to realize that everyone you meet has a deep yearning for belongingness and connectedness and groundedness, including the doctor that you see, right? If you go and see a doctor, you don't see an expanding panoramic awareness and so on, right? You see someone who's supposed to fix you, right? Get you back on track. Right? Then we can get back to normal. At least we got rid of that, like after COVID, we're all going to get back to normal. Right? And we have. We never left normal. Right? This continuous collaborative creation. Right? And so this is actually what we do at this stage. We reflect on, within this primordial space of contemplation. Right? Which primordial space of contemplation? Reflect on the belongingness that's in this. Right? You may find that you're reflecting, you don't feel like you belong. You don't feel like you're at home. Right? That's wonderful. Right? Why? Right? Because then we can begin to say, well, actually, what would be home? Maybe a little bit more this is not something that's just performed in a temple or in a monastery on a meditation cushion. This is living that we're doing. Right? Within this primordial space of contemplation, reflect on refuge. Right? I'm a refugee. Where do I go for refuge? Where do I go for refuge when climate catastrophe, they've been saying, look, we got to move on from calling it climate change. We got to call it climate emergency. I think now we have to call it a climate of catastrophe. Look what's happening in politics. That's a climate of catastrophe. Look what's happening in the climate. That's a climate of catastrophe. If your homes have been on fire, or you can't breathe the air because there's so much smoke. I mean, right now we live with, all these sheep and green grass in New Zealand, and it's all very lovely. But 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, I think it was about 3 years ago, there were catastrophic fires on the east of Australia. And there was so much smoke from the fires that they came over the Tasman 1,500 kilometers to New Zealand, and the skies were kind of like strange colors at night. The sunsets were all kind of red and looked like an advertisement for Western Australia, right? And this was smoke from the fires on the other side of the world. But then we haven't had smoke for a long time, so we've forgotten about that. But how many refugees are there from war, from invasion, from famine, from a collapsed economy, from unjust politics and judicial systems? Right? People are looking for this. Right? We're refugees, and we're kind of, in a sense, refugees are beings who are seeking refuge. Right? And what would be refuge for you right now? Refuge, right? Not refuge as some ultimate goal that I'm going to achieve. It's Dharma, it's enlightenment, it's off there. Right? Actually, for me, refuge would be just a little bit more at home right now than I was 2 seconds ago. There's a process. It's like this refuging until eventually there's the possibility, right, of a greater continuum of groundedness, connectedness, and belonging. And I mean, this seems so kind of ordinary, and yet I confess to you that the ordinary is what I find useful in my life. Okay? That there are times when suddenly the world's going in such a way that it doesn't collide nicely with your preferences. I'm sure you've noticed this. Right? And you can sometimes get caught up in situations where, it's right, and then you're planning, if only I could do this, and then I could get back on track and do what I really want to do. And I find it really useful. It's a blessing that somehow I've trained myself to the kind of blind, stupid habit of frequently pausing and smiling and breathing. You're coming into this doing. You're smiling and you're breathing, you're present. You're smiling and you're breathing and you're present, and you're kind of like a flower. It's an expanding, blossoming of appreciation. The beginning is just me, but then there's me in the environment. Right? And the relationships with this tree and this leaf and this bug and these beings and so on. And I go, how did I forget this? And then off you go again on your racing, panic kind of agenda or whatever it is. This is, the possibility might be dawning that we could actually cultivate a skill in doing this, a kind of a certain degree of mastery, right? To be able to kind of ride this bicycle of collaborative creation. In collaborative creation, you bring your best to the situation. But that jerk over there just brought this horrible thing to the situation. Right? And your collaboration goes skew-if. It's not collaboration like you all collaborate with what I want to do. That's collaboration. Right? It's like if I'm going to, this is more like making music, like jazz music or something, improvisational music. And you've got to really listen to how the others and you're responding, and they hive off in a different riff and change the rhythm and change the key, and so that you're making adjustments and so on. And we're learning to kind of, some jazz musicians can do incredible, beautiful music. They have no idea where they're going. They're not in control, but they're not skillfully engaged. Right? We're learning the art to kind of dance with this living that we are. This is Dharma. This is primordial Dharma. Okay? And so, prepare, find a comfortable posture, right? Invite the body-mind community to settle whilst making friends with your breathing. Right? Then open the doors of appreciation, a flowering of this state. You're not moving on to step 2. It's more like step 1 is just getting richer and fuller. Right? And you begin to feel this kind of increased recognizing of the intercollaborative nature of what's going on. Right? And you start to have you start to also recognize how much suffering arises for people when they totally lose sight of that. And it's all about what I want to do and what they want to do and like this. Right? And there's kind of a yearning to somehow be able to live in a way, not telling people that they ought to do this, but somehow living in a way that invites people to do this. That we could do this together. We could learn the art of living well together. And that includes the art of dying. Right? Because cells are dying all the time. Right? I mean, living, birthing, dying. Right? We live courageously in this world. We live with heart, courage. Now, you could do this, you could enhance this contemplation on refuge. This is it. This is it. Just, right? You reflect on your groundedness, your connectedness, your belonging. But perhaps you would like to enhance this with the following words. But you should also feel free to express these aspirations and understandings in any other way that feels meaningful. Right? It's like trying to remind ourselves the words of the sadhana is not what we're doing, what we're practicing. What we think the word means is not what we're practicing. What we're practicing is a kind of non-practice. What I'm doing is becoming more at home in the fullness of the living that we are. And we're using these kind of words as reminders, if you like, to kind of nudge us. And so here's some words that you might use, but you might not, right? Bringing to mind my teachers and ancestors, along with my human and non-human companions on this path of life unfolding. On behalf of all of us, and then there's this whole long thing, was I take refuge in the true state of affairs. Okay? And you see, if we go more deeply into this kind of interbeing, inter-knowing, open, spacious, collaborative, creative dancing that we are, right? You begin to really feel a sense of connectedness with history. Okay? And so there's just a very brief allusion here to a practice that I've called touching the earth in 6 prostrations. And it's a huge, rich practice in and of itself. Right? And it's like there's this famous story, for those of you that are not familiar with it, of the Buddha on the night of the awakening. He wasn't the Buddha, he was Shakyamuni. He hadn't awakened yet. He hadn't become Buddha, right? And he was trying to cultivate naturalness. And every once in a while, his dad would creep into his mind and say, "When are you going to take over the family business?" Right? Well, he was kind of a small king, local king, you know, and kind of, you want your son to kind of take over the business kind of thing. I'm upgrading the situation. Right? Maybe can I be spending my time being a yogi or something? Look, when are you going to get a real job? What are you going to do when you grow up? I mean, this kind of, you know, yoga and meditation is all right for sort of adolescence or something, but get real, right? Could you imagine for a moment this man, Shakyamuni, having a few doubts? Parental pressures. Oh, my mum would think of this and what about that woman that I met last week? And you're sort of off. And anyway, they portray this in the thing of the Buddha being plagued by this horde of temptations and accusations and fears and judgments and so on, and they're arranged like monsters all around this kind of rather gaunt meditator looking figure, right? And apparently, right, according to the story, at that point he was just kind of almost ready to give up. You know, it just seemed hopeless, this kind of crazy mess, right, of disconnected living. And some intuition inside, he reached down and he touched the earth with his hand, right? And it's called the Earth Witness Mudra, and you'll often see pictures of the Buddha touching the earth. Okay? And it's like he touched the ground of his being. Okay? And then the magic part happened. As soon as he touched the ground of his being, thump, all the demons disappeared and he flowered and became Buddha. Okay? He became the joyous Buddha-ha-ing, the ha-ha-ha-ha, that's the joy part, and the Bud, the bud, the Buddha, Bud-ha-ha-ing. And he realized he was a Bud-ha-ha-ing. There's something not joyful in this is fun, but there's something miraculous and wondrous and profound in this budding of life that we are settled into. That he touched the earth. And so we have this touching of the earth, you know, like getting in touch with the ground of your being. And for some people, it can really help to take a big detour from the sadhana now, and have a go and spend a bit of time reflecting on touching the earth in 6 prostrations. There's an outline of it in one of the chapters in True Refuge here. But I'll just outline the basic practice for you. Contemplating the ecological ground, a matrix of living beings and processes. In wonderment and appreciation, I touch the earth. You know, as I contemplate my interconnectedness with plants and creatures, right? Or actually more to the point, when I contemplate my interconnectedness with the sensations of my bottom on the chair and the texture of my clothing on my skin. And if there happens to be a breeze blowing on you, this breeze, it's not trying to contemplate your connectedness with nature, which is outside the room and happening over there. It's this nature, wherever you are, just expanding it. Right? Contemplating the genetic and historic ground of my ancestors, a vast river of talents. With profound gratitude and appreciation, I touch the earth. And you realize that, you know, I mean, I have a talent for making noses. You understand what I'm saying? Okay? Just look at it. Look at the nobility of it. See see that, right? And if we have my brother in the room, he could turn to the side and you think, God, that's the same kind of nose. And if my father came into the room, he's long dead, he'd sort of sit there like this and he'd say, see the nobility of this nose. It has the same, it's got a kind of little bump there and a kind of a point there and a dink there and so on. And I've got a hunch, I never got to check this out, but I bet my dad's nose was a bit like one of his dad's noses, or maybe his mum's nose, right? And this is a talent which I've inherited. How to build this particular amazing looking Hearn Smith Crafer Bishop body, right? Those kind of local lineage names. Right? I mean, it's a talent that I have. I'm doing it now, but I inherited it from them. Right? Have any of you got any kind of genetic aberrations? Don't focus in on the detail. You got kind of physiological problems. You go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, that's genetic. It's in the family," and you feel, "Oh, good. It's not my fault. I can blame it on my genes." Right? I'm part of a river of talents. Can you imagine? Oh, my parents didn't have any talents. It was just like, God, it was so good when I finally left home. I got out of there. Right? Like, oh yeah? Who do you think knows how to digest a banana? Right? How do you think you learned how to, utilize oxygen floating around in the air, right? And combine that with carbon and do things with it, right? This is a talent, right? There's a kind of genetic ancestral history. Speaking, for example, nobody invents verbal language. We find ourselves immersed. We're immersed in a culture, right? Like right now, while I'm sitting in here, I'm bringing this culture to this place. My connectedness with nature is right here in this room. Contemplating my teachers and mentors, an ocean of inspiration, feeling your presence within and around me with deep appreciation and gratitude. That deep appreciation and gratitude is the touching of the earth. Okay? That we have kind of beings who have appeared in our life who are somehow the way they live, how they speak, how they engage with us, reminds us of wholeness, of something bigger than this kind of fragmented, individualistic, competitive living that we've been doing. These are our lineage teachers. They're teaching us about the lineage of life unfolding. I'll just read the first little part, and we can do this together, right? Only I'm going to change some words. It says standing, feet firmly on the earth. Okay? And let's do that. Let's stand up. Okay. Wherever you are, just kind of stand up. I hope you can just hear me. You don't need to see me. You probably just see my belly, right? Right? We're standing, feet firmly on the earth. And you go, well, my feet aren't firmly on the earth, they're on the carpet. Or, no, they're not on the carpet, they're on the floor. But I can assure you that this floor is on joists underneath, which are on posts that go deeply into the ground. Ultimately, we're standing, our feet on the earth, right? I soften into my bones and muscles, my whole body gently, microscopically swaying in space, dancing of fine adjustments supporting this upright posture. And we're smiling, and we're breathing. We're softening down through the body. Feel all kinds of conversations, if you like, little kind of responsive adjustments taking place inside. Breathing in and breathing out, I feel the tides of air the ebb and flow, the endless, intimate breathing with a living world. Now you see, if I was to change the visualization a bit, and just imagine that right now you're going to put your mouth upon the mouth of somebody else. And when you breathe in, they breathe out. And when you breathe out, they breathe in. And you're doing mouth to mouth. It's incredibly intimate. Now mentally stand back so there's a little bit of a space between you. And you're breathing in, you're breathing out, breathing in what they have just recently breathed out. And they are breathing out what you've just recently breathed in. Okay. And the trees are giving off oxygen. Their breath cycle is a 24-hour cycle. They only have one inhalation and one exhalation per day. Right? They kind of exhale oxygen, right? And then later on, right, it's carbon dioxide coming with this oxygen. It's like this flow. Imagine for a moment you're breathing in intimacy with every being in this room. Don't imagine it, just soften into the realization that this is, whether you like it or not, what's happening. Right? And I'm trying to speak very, very carefully so that I don't spit too much. But there are little globs of spit. Let's just say it as it is. You're safe out there in cyberspace because it probably doesn't go through the internet. But the people in this room are just actually breathing in kind of globs of tarchin. And tarchin is breathing in globs of you. Present. All my senses are open. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking. So I'm standing, I'm breathing, I'm present. And whenever you like, you could sit, and you just change the word standing to right, smiling, breathing, present. Right? And even when we're sitting, there are kind of micro adjustments and movements that are taking place. The standing's a good kind of illustrator, because you recognize how the body is kind of adjusting to hold yourself in space. Whereas when you sit, sometimes, especially if you kind of flop down, you become unaware of the dynamic that's taking place. Smiling, breathing, present, I open the doors of appreciation to the vast ecological ground of being, ground of becoming. I feel myself intimately partnered in a dynamic matrix of living process. A multi-leveled unfolding of uncountable, interdependent manifestations of embodied knowing. With each breath, I breathe with a photosynthesizing world. My body, speech, and mind are expressions of air, water, earth, and radiant solar energy, weavings of becoming, journeyings of atoms, molecules, cells, and organs, this living world within me and around me is a dancing of organisms, biosystems, planets, solar systems, and cosmic arisings. And this is so when we're feeling wonderful, and this is so when we're feeling lousy, although usually when we're feeling lousy, it's more likely you forget this. Okay? Could we somehow value this to cultivate this openness to engage on this level? You can, actually. You don't have to put this as a question. You can cultivate this. You can also not cultivate this. I sense the rivers and oceans in my blood and tears. Or if that's a little bit too abstract, just get a bit of spit in your mouth, in your spit, in your saliva. Now, intellectually, you know that there's lots of water in you. You're just a big walking puddle of water. Okay? And we surely know that this was once an ocean. Surely we know that this was once a rain cloud. Surely we know the water cycle is happening. How did we not know it? You know, I saw a headline the other day, and they were saying, like, just after they just had a hurricane blow through Florida with $20 billion worth of damage or something, and someone was venturing the possibility that it might have something to do with climate change. What a wild idea, you know. I mean, the thing is that we almost live as if we're not part of the water cycle. We're not part of the earth cycle. We're not part of the atmospheric cycle. We somehow are little blobs that walk around, we just consume, and, you know, you kind of unlimited resources. And, you know, everyone here knows this that I'm talking about, intellectually, on a good day. And everyone here has moments of absolutely forgetting this and acting as if this was not the truth. And a spiritual practice is a practice which values entering into this fullness and embracing it. And we do it gently, and it's not something we have to achieve. It's like, it's whatever's happening, this is it. This is it happening. I sense the rivers and oceans in my blood and tears. I feel the mystery of transforming vegetable and animal flesh, the continuous coming into being and passing away that is my body, feelings, and thinking. Right now, I'm just kind of, all these words you're hearing are just transformed millet and macadamia nuts and walnuts and hemp seed oil and flax oil and hemp hearts and roasted sesame seeds and almonds and all ground up and so on, and yogurt and a bit of quinoa and a bit of buckwheat and water, a whole pile of water, and heat. And then you put it in this pot and you boil it all up, and then you shove it into this vat, and then out comes a class. Talking millet, talking carrots. I mean, some days what's talking is not like that, you know, it's talking indigestion. Right? We kind of know this, but somehow that this is a reality that not only do I live with, but everyone's living with. Okay? And if you've ever seen that you're not totally in control of your own life, you might sort of soften the expectation that other beings be in controls of their lives. Because maybe they're not. How can we kind of unfold together with awe and wonderment, sensing the beginninglessness and endlessness of everything that is, experiencing this as the ground and soil of life. I touch the earth. Okay? You don't have to touch the earth. The recognizing this is the touching of the earth of your being. And then we start again, opening the doors of appreciation to the genetic and historic river of becoming. My mother and father, grandparents, great-grandparents, a beginningless chain of ancestors extending back as far as I can imagine. Smiling, breathing, opening into this. Like, it's awesome. It's not just some little intellectual contemplation. It's totally awesome to just suddenly kind of know in a way that you've deeper than you've known before. It's like I'm here on this earth, in this matrix of unfolding humanity. Okay? I'm just skipping ahead. It's too much to read to you. Okay? Standing, breathing, present. I open the doors of appreciation to all the beings who have been Dharma teachers for me. Yogis, gurus, mystics and mentors of many lineages and traditions, artists, musicians, philosophers, scientists, adventurers, writers, educators, social activists, healers and friends, beings who have inspired the unfolding of my life in the direction of wisdom and compassion. Okay? And as people say, oh, well, I don't have a lineage of teachers or anything, I'm not into that kind of thing. You wouldn't be who everyone does. This is it. You've had no inspiration in your life at all from anyone whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Okay? And gradually we begin to realize that this ecological ground is flowing through my ancestors. And my ancestors are also, some of my ancestors were my gurus and mentors. Right? And each one of these ancestors had their own mentors and inspirations, and all of them were busy eating millet, right? Or Cocoa Puffs, or cornflakes, or muffin, or however you, or just black coffee. You know, your breakfast, you got to have something to keep you going, right? Everyone's like this flow through. So I'm smiling, I'm breathing, I'm present, I'm opening. There's a sense of like opening into this. And I'm reaching for the trowel, and I'm digging the earth, or I'm turning the key in the ignition of the car, and I'm starting the car. We are starting the car. Okay? Like this is a transformation, if you like, of the ordinary into the extraordinary. Okay? And there's eventually you begin to see that the fourth touching of the earth is when you begin to realize that these three flow through and interweave with each other. And then you begin to realize that the fifth touching of the earth is to recognize that the difficulties and struggles that you experience in your life are arising out of the dancing of this same ground of being, of becoming. Right? And kind of letting go of clinging, of kind of self-critique and negativity and all this kind of stuff. I touch the earth, right? And then finally, it's like feeling the kind of celebration of all of this, cultivating love and compassion and wonderment for everyone. I touch the earth. This is a completely separate practice, seemingly, right? It's outlined in True Refuge. So this was a bit of a detour. We get back to, we haven't got to the refuge yet. This was just the preliminaries, right? Within this primordial space of contemplation, reflect on your deepest sense of groundedness, connectedness, and belonging. Right? Whatever for you is your deepest. Right? It doesn't mean that tomorrow it couldn't be deeper. Right? It's not. We're not talking about contemplate ultimate refuge or something where you would like to be. No, this is your actual. What gives you a sense of comfortable strength, smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering. Bringing to mind my teachers and ancestors, along with my human and non-human companions on this path of life unfolding. On behalf of all of us, I take refuge in the true state of affairs. Spontaneously, ever-present, timeless awareness. Spontaneous, ever-present, timeless responsiveness. Radically inclusive love unfolding in all its fullness. Right? Radically at the root, right? Rooted, radical. Right? Radically inclusive. At the root of this, it includes everything. Radically inclusive. Love, right? Kind of acceptance of the legitimacy of another to be the fullness of being that they are in relationship with you being the fullness that you are. It's a kind of dynamic, creative, changing relationship. Vast, ungraspable suchness that is this living world universe. And every once in a while you'll have an incredible moment where you if you happen to use these words, right? I take refuge in the true state of affairs. What's that? Oh, it's the vast, ungraspable suchness that is this living world universe. And you look around yourself for a moment and you go, oh yeah, this carpet, and the people who made the carpet, and the story of how the carpet came to be in this house, and the little critter that's running across the floor, and the fly that's buzzing around on the thing is all part of this. This, not this. So as I said in the book that I titled "This Nectar of Naturalness," this is it. This nectar of naturalness was just a whole book to expound on the smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, and the offering. Okay? But it's called this nectar of naturalness it's an extraordinary thing to realize that this ground I am standing on, nothing special extra, is not a kind of Tibetan kind of heavenly realm or some kind of abstract conceptual philosophical realization state. It's this thing of sitting here with the sun on me, eating my porridge, smelling the coffee, talking to Mary. This is... And at that point you might be speechless. There's a whole heap more down here, but I'm not going to go there today. That was kind of enough. Okay? So let's recap. Let's begin at the beginning. Right? And then we'll work our way through all this stuff, which is the middle. And then when we get to the end, we'll get to the end, okay? So let's begin at the beginning, which is now. And let's open our appreciation of the full richness of here, the ever-present immediacy of this now. That's the middle. And it's still now. And if you're able to do this successfully, or if you're not able to do this successfully, you'll end up now. So we're smiling, we're breathing. We're presenting, we're present. I think there's tremendous value in having just very, very simple reminders. I think we can too easily get kind of seduced into beautiful philosophical detours about abstract philosophical and spiritual concepts. Whereas the actual path is just step by step, smiling, we're breathing, present, appreciating. Not thinking about this, but feeling it. There's a tactile, felt sense of your body engaged in breathing, maintaining its posture, making adjustments. And feeling this aspiration to somehow cultivate this way of being in your life in such a way that becomes an invitation for others to spontaneously kind of recognize something wonderful, something precious about being engaged with what this mystery of life unfolding is. And then in the very midst of this, reflect on what gives you the situation of beingness, which is your greatest sense of groundedness, of belonging, of refuge. Refuge is a good word when we're refugees because it makes sense. But refuge doesn't make any sense if you're not a refugee. It's not attractive at all. You don't need to have a refuge. You're not just wanting to hunker down and be safe. Yeah. But to be kind of dynamic and engaged and in that sense strong in our relating, right, with the unknown and the unknowable. Are there any thoughts or questions or this is really, there's only so much I can say about this. I can talk endlessly forever about this, right? Because it's constantly changing and unfolding. But actually it's not something that we need to talk about until you understand it and then you go away. It's we're talking about a doing that we're doing, a living that we're doing. Right? And unless you put this into practice, eventually it'll just become tedious and repetitive and boring and there's nowhere to go. But I don't see how life can be tedious and repetitive and boring because it's always changing. Jen.
Thank you, Tachin. So my question is about this process of refuging.
Yes.
So you've had a lifetime of study and practice which involved, I assume, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Buddha. But this sadhana kind of suggests to me kind of a method which might produce some result, but it's not asking me to take refuge in the Buddha, it seems. It's asking me to take refuge in Buddharing.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, as a practitioner, I don't need to see myself as a Buddhist, which I don't. But if I did see myself as a Buddhist, this might somewhat challenge.
Yeah, it might derail the whole process.
Yeah, it might challenge that process of Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana, and that's the only way.
Absolutely.
This suggests to me that right here, right now, I could just wake up and that's it.
Well, you're
Is it that simple, or am I being...
Well, first of all, the word to take refuge is a phrase, taking refuge, right? It's a very common Buddhist phrase. I've used it because I've been involved with Buddhist communities for a long, long time, and if I completely abandon all that language, then it kind of wouldn't be anyone to talk to, because all the friends and people that I know are wanting me to talk that language, right? So I kind of use this language, but actually, if you look at some of the translations, they often don't talk about taking refuge. They talk about, I go for refuge in the Buddha. Now now that's quite different. I go for refuge in the wholeness. I go for refuge in the totality. You know, it's like I take refuge. Taking sort of has the sense like I can, hold on to it. I've got something. So maybe that's actually a very unhelpful phrase, because there's say Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, it's like I go for refuge, right? It doesn't say anything about taking. And then the question then comes down to not the going, but what we mean by the Buddha. If the text says I take refuge in the Buddha. And so if you how can I put it, if you just don't actually take that as a question, what do I mean by the Buddha, or what does anyone mean by the Buddha, then you probably got yourself in just another convenient little samsaric cul-de-sac forever, right? But if you are asking the question, so I mean, I've been involved with this obviously in a deep way, and I've studied myriad texts, and I can expound a Buddhist vehicle. But my understanding that I'm sharing with you didn't come out of taking refuge in the Buddha. It came out of the discomfort of saying meaningless things again and again and again, and I had to make them meaningful. Like I either stopped saying it, or I had to rearrange how I understood it to mean. All my friends were Buddhists, so I had to kind of hang out with them, I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but not really. We find our community where we find ourselves, right? You share languages and concepts together and so on, right? But internally, there was a contradiction. I take refuge in some man who lived 2,500 years ago. I couldn't see how that was going to help me out, quite frankly, right? And so actually I forgot about that. I just thought, well, I'll set that aside. I don't know what it means. It's probably something really profound. I allowed that to be, but I totally forgot about the man. Right? It's got Buddham Saranang Gacchami sort of flub that. Get on to the real stuff. I take refuge in the Dharma. And then the Dharma, I thought, I understand what that is. That's the kind of teachings for liberation and waking up and non-clinging awareness, and I can grasp that, and I use that, and I rely on that, and I could see taking refuge in the Dharma. And then taking refuge in the Sangha seemed to be complete delusion and waste of time, because I got quite serious about this, and I became a monk. And when you're a monk, you're considered to be, in the way Buddhists speak, you're a member of the Sangha. So here I was kind of absolutely neurotic young guy, right? Desperately trying to figure out how on earth he was going to survive in this world, right? Doing everything that he was doing. And then one day I had my hair shaved off, and they gave me another set of clothes to wear, and I was now a Sangha. And then people were saying, I take refuge in the Sangha. And I thought, what? Right? How could I possibly? They might all be as nutty as I am. Right? Kind of, I looked in and I saw actually that the Sangha, the Sangha of monks and nuns, right, was a bunch of people who had hopes and fears and projections and expectations and made judgment calls and all kinds of stuff. And so it didn't make any sense to me that there was going to be any refuge in the Sangha. So I gave up on Sangha. So I took refuge in the Dharma, right? That which nourishes and supports, and the nourishing and supporting that I am. And then slowly, out of doing that, I began to see in the context, not just by taking refuge all the time. I've studied biology, I've studied ecology, I'm investigating other things, I'm living a real life. I begin to see that actually there's a process of budding. And although I've emphasized it and I make these corny little rewrites of the story about Buddha ha-ha-ha-ing and so on, right? There was like a bodhiing, you know. He says, I'm a bodhiing, you know, and it's kind of identifying that he looked deeply and he saw that he was Buddha ha-ing. And I thought, oh, well, actually we're all Buddha ha-ing. It doesn't mean we're all Buddhas and we have an inner Buddha and I'm looking for some statue that's sitting inside my heart. Right? And so, and then, but, you know, so then I could go for refuge in Buddha ha-ing and I could go for refuge in Dharma, but I still had a difficult time with the Sangha. Until it slowly, gradually, because I'm a really slow learner, right? It's just slowly started to kind of ding to me that we are interbeing with the microorganisms in the soil, that we're interbeing with the green plants, that we're interbeing with every domain and dimension of life, right? That this is the only community. Sangha means community. It's not a community of monks and nuns, it's a community of, it's the Aryan Sangha. Actually, is what the Buddha said. You take refuge in the Aryan Sangha, right? At the beginning, he had people say, I take refuge in the Dharma. He never got people to say, I take refuge in the Buddha, right? And then when there were too many people coming and saying, well, can I take refuge? Yeah, take refuge in the Dharma, he said. He finally got tired of saying that because there were huge lineups of people all wanting to take refuge with him. So he said to Ananda and Sariputta and some of these other sort of senior disciples, right? He said, okay, you can give them refuge in the Dharma in the name of the Buddha. So then they started going, oh, I take refuge in the Buddha. And he was still alive, he was still a living presence. And the Dharma, right? And then gradually, God knows what kind of social thing happened, the Sangha became a specialized thing. But it was supposed to be the noble. Aryan means noble, right? It's kind of, it's the nobility of, and a dignity and an awesomeness of this unfolding, this joyous unfolding of seeing this kind of, that which is supporting and mothering and nurturing and simultaneously mothering and supporting and nurturing others, the Dharma, right? And the Sangha, this community of interbeing, interknowing, right? And, you know, we must take refuge in these three things, right? And we don't ever have to have ever heard the word Buddha. I've never heard the word Dharma. I've never heard the word Sangha. We're talking about the process of this living, right? And you know, I don't know how I can convey this to people. There's something quite wonderful about tremendously valuing a tradition, for example, like Buddhist teachings, and at the same time having the confidence and dignity to recognize this is just a tool to support the good living of beings, and like just get on with the good living. Have the confidence to kind of enter into this mystery that you are, using the supports if they're supportive, right? It doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to do it all myself, and you can't do that. We have mentors, we have sources of inspiration. We didn't learn to talk without somebody already inventing the language. Nobody invented it. It kind of came up out of the biology. So this is not a shift at all from what's meant. If you look into any of the kind of deep teachings of the kind of reasonably recognized awake beings, they would be assenting to this. They too have to communicate in the language of their The Dalai Lama couldn't suddenly just start talking in psychotherapeutic language only. What would you do with all the rest of these monks? There's already in process something. Right? So, smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering, increasingly grounded in this. Right? By the power of these wholesome activities, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness. In the very midst of this extraordinary mystery of birth, growing up, developing, making connections, occasionally becoming ill, hopefully getting better, then getting ill again, gradually decaying, gradually falling apart and dying. In the midst of this extraordinary, beginningless, endless mystery, may we help all beings to realize their true interbeing, interknowing nature. Sarvamangalam, Sarvamangalam, Sarvamangalam. Thank you all. People are waving. I feel I have to wave back. You see, this is where we have this like shared language, right? That's good.
Thank you, Georgian.
And I really urge people. I mean, in a sense, this sadhana, which was put together as a kind of a summation sadhana for myself, right? And why did I even bother with Samantabhadra? I bothered with Samantabhadra because it's as a figure within the Mahayana tradition. Samantabhadra is a major, major figure, and has been with me for decades, right? And is kind of the root, if you like, of teachings of Longchenpa and the Dzogchen and Mahamudra traditions, and so it's part of the language, if you like. But it's really a summation of the path of natural awakening. And many of the books that I've written earlier, True Refuge, Foundations of Mindfulness, Breathing, the Natural Way to Meditate, Walking in Wisdom, This Nectar of Naturalness, right? Those are specifically, each one of them is going into like heaps and heaps of different hints at things which someone might find they can actually begin to experiment with in the ongoing livingness of their life. And when you experiment with the technique, it means that you feel free to shift it and modify it and fix it up a bit and make it work for you, right? And this is not kind of turning your back on tradition, or basically I think there are traditions, and you're not supposed to change the tradition, and you do it exactly this way and practice in this way. And there are teachings like that, it appears. This is not one of them, right? Don't do that. And I don't believe that actually anyone comes to liberation through working that way. They may use some of these methods, but until they start to recognize, no, actually it's talking about this. And what do I do as a yogi now with cancer? How does that kind of practice take place? How does this new situation take place that my house has been burnt down by forest fires? Right? Now how does this practice take place? How does this practice take place when I've just got a promotion and I'm head of a department, right? And they gave me a fake gold wristwatch, right? Or something like that, right? It doesn't, however we're finding ourselves, this mystery is unfolding. It's closer than hands and feet. It's gloriously free. Nobody owns it. It's not spiritual. It's not religious. It's not scientific. It's just kind of real. Yeah. So I'm saying this, I'm just, please, allow yourself to explore it. So, until next time. Good. Have a wonderful day.